Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero show with me, your host Simon Conboy. Carrying on with the season preview series today, today's episode will be focusing on my beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So as per usual, I'll be going through the projected starters on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. We're in the midst of camp, we got pre-season upcoming, but I still feel this will be a fairly accurate representation of where this team will be early September. I'll then be going through the key points in the schedule and giving my projected record for the 2017 season before finishing up with what I consider to be the three key areas for this team if they are going to get over the hump and make a playoff push for the first time in a decade. So we'll hop right in with the offensive starters, beginning at quarterback, of course, with Jameis Winston. This is a big year, I feel, for Winston. He's progressing well as the Buccaneers starter. Last season was, I think, an improvement in just about every area. Had it more difficult, I think, with the retirement of Logan Mankins and the struggles of the running game and the interior of the offensive line pretty much as a whole. And didn't have a great group to work with in terms of the receivers. So I think he did a very good job being as productive as he was. This year, you can expect a big step up. Their weapons are there, more experience, and there's some expectation. But he's been dealing with expectation ever since he began playing in college. So I don't necessarily think that's a huge deal. We know what he is: big armed, physical quarterback, can break tackles, is better at escaping than he looks. He looks very clumsy. Reminds me of Roethlisberger in that way. Plays a lot like him as well. More than happy to throw the ball deep, which will certainly cause issues with turnovers. That is the big knock on him at this point in his career. Far too many. I think with the extra talent around him, it should be less of an issue this season. Running back, I still think Doug Martin has the most talent as a pure runner, so I suspect once his suspension's up, he will be the primary starter. Charles Sims is a very good receiving back, although he did struggle last year running between the tackles, so he may have a somewhat limited role in that regard. Would not be surprising if Jacquizz Rodgers has more carries than a lot of people expect. He did perform reasonably well last season in the wake of Doug Martin's injury. Probably was the team's most productive back. This team needs this group to give them more than they did last year. The receiving core, a lot of hype around this group this year, and frankly, I can see why. Mike Evans has developed into an absolute stud. He'll be the number one. He was absolutely fantastic last season, an all-pro caliber year, with very little help from the rest of the guys. Teams really could focus on him, and he still made plays. As I've said in previous videos, his highlight reel is the most impressive, I think, of any receiver in the league last season in terms of difficulty of catches. Deshaun Jackson comes in as the number two. He's a pretty one-dimensional player, but he does that dimension. Well, he adds that dimension better than anyone else in the league. That being the go route and the deep crosses. He's still a speed demon. I don't know how much longer he'll be able to perform that role, of course, but I don't believe his legs are going to fade away this season. Last year, he was very productive with the Redskins. The Buccaneers have not had a player like this since Joey Galloway. So with Winston's arm and the threat of Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson could be very productive. And in the slot, Adam Humphries, who's been quietly a decent player for the Bucs, has been a reliable pair of hands in the slot. Chris Godwin has apparently been very, very impressive in camp, and he was a third rounder, so it wouldn't be surprising if he perhaps inches his way into that number 3 role at some point over the course of the season, but expect to see both guys utilised over the course of the year. The tight end group, another good looking group. Cameron Brate, much like Humphries, very quietly been a very productive player the last couple of seasons. Last year had 8 touchdowns, was very dangerous in the intermediate ranges and very good as a red zone target. Again, he makes some very difficult catches in traffic. Seems to have a bit of a knack for it. He's not the most athletic guy, but him and Winston do seem to have a bit of a connection. And OJ Howard, who fell to the Buccaneers in the draft, a very talented tight end. He'll certainly be utilised a lot. The Buccaneers do utilise the 2 tight end set as much as anybody in the league. Howard, a superior blocker to Bray, I think we can say even at this point. He was very good at that role in college and far more athletic. How much of an impact he'll have in the receiving game, I think it is questionable, just because of the amount of guys there and having to unseat Cameron Bray. But in the long run, I think he's going to be a very useful player for this team, and I expect him to contribute immediately as a run blocker. Onto the offensive line, Donovan Smith will once again man the left tackle spot. He's not got the quickest feet, does struggle against some of the speed rushers. He's a good run blocker, but he's probably better suited to the right hand side. I've said this many a time, but he's only heading into his 3rd year. He's done an okay job. I think he could potentially take a big leap this year. If so, that would be huge for this team. DeMar Dotson, the sturdy veteran, well, I say sturdy, he's been injured a fair bit over the last couple of years, will man the right side. He is a good player. Very much flies under the radar, but he's a more than solid right tackle. Good in pass pro, very good run blocker. I think he's an above average player at that spot. The guard position, my biggest concern. J.R. Sweezy, the Buccaneers seem excited about him. I'm not sure what's so exciting personally. I don't think he was much more than average in his time in Seattle, but he is a veteran. He's got some experience, and this was a problem area last year. The team is really hoping he can come in and be an impact player, particularly in the run game. And Kevin Pamphile, who's a versatile player, I'll give him that, but he really did struggle with some of the better defensive tackles, and there's some good ones in the NFC South last season. I don't think he's quite got enough power for the guard position personally. And at centre, they're moving Ali Marpet, which is, I think, a bit of a dubious decision. I do consider the centre position more important than guard for the most part. However, when you've got a guy who's bordering on a Pro Bowl talent at guard, it is a risk. If it pans out, then fantastic. I do like Marpet. I think he's a very good player after just 2 seasons. He's improved on an almost weekly basis. Very good pass protector, solid run blocker, and I really hope he performs very well at centre. And then the kicker, Roberto Aguayo, who was an absolute nightmare last year, but he's incredibly talented. He's got a huge leg. It would be a shame if that was a waste, especially after that terrible decision to spend a 2nd round draft pick on him. But expect to see him as the kicker. Now this offense, the passing game looks like it should theoretically be great. It is just a question of whether the pass protection can hold up, and I worry about that primarily on the interior. Whilst Donovan Smith, as I say, does struggle with speed rushes, I do still think he's competent enough. Health is the only thing I could see slowing down this receiving group. That you've got a little bit of everything there. Evans is the big physical, intermediate and deep threat. Deshaun Jackson is the speed guy. Godwin can probably do a little bit of everything, and Adam Humphries is your traditional possession slot receiver. When you combine that with the 2 tight ends, this group is diverse and can attack teams in a lot of ways, and Charles Sims is a very good receiver from the backfield also. So there's certainly weapons there, but the run game is a giant question mark, particularly with the performance of the interior. Doug Martin looked sluggish before he got injured last season. Of course, he had his personal troubles for which he's got that suspension. If those areas come together, this could be one of the most dangerous offenses in the league. But without it, I think too much will fall on Jameis, and then there is the potential for those turnovers to start reading their heads. He also does need to develop consistency. That has been a bit of a problem. He's been a very streaky passer in his young career. Moving on to the defensive starters, we'll start at defensive end. Robert Ayers, for me, is a cert start. He played very well last year. When he came back from injury around mid-season, the defense really did improve. He plays the run and the pass very well. He's not a huge sack guy, but he's above average in all facets. He's become a very good player over the course of his career after a very slow start. I believe Noah Spence ends up getting the nod as the starter at the probably right end, actually. I think Ayers will probably play on the left. Spence looks more like a traditional speed rusher. Played well last season before getting injured. I think he just adds more juice to the pass rush. William Golson will be used. He was extended to a pretty big contract and is one of the best run-stuffing defensive ends in the league, but he doesn't quite offer enough in pressure. I wouldn't be surprised to see him moving up and down the line as potential defensive tackling run situations to possibly spell the DTs. Speaking of the DTs, for me, what looks like one of the best tandems in football, Gerald McCoy is a stud, one of the best pass rushing tackles in the league. He's got an elite first step, is very strong, certainly capable of being a dominating player. And Chris Baker, who was brought over from the Redskins. Now, this is by far the most talented player Gerald McCoy has had to work with in the middle. Baker's been the best defensive lineman for Washington in the last couple of years. Good run player, can generate pass rush. I think between the two of them, they're going to cause teams a lot of problems up the middle of the field. So I expect big things from these two. The outside linebacker position, Levante David, slow start to last season, but second half of the year he was back to his usual self. The numbers haven't been as impressive since Quan Alexander was drafted, but this is one of the best players at his position in the league. Incredible speed, solid coverage guy, and a very solid tackler. When he reads and goes, he's as good as it gets. Kendall Beckwith was a third-round pick. So for that reason, I think he gets a start. I can't see why this team would select a linebacker in the third, not to utilise him immediately, even though he is coming off an injury. He'll be coming off the field on passing downs because Quan and Levante are very good players. It'll be interesting to see whether he can improve the one spot in this linebacking group that has been an issue in the last couple of years. And at middle linebacker, as I mentioned, Quan Alexander. He's flown somewhat under the radar. I have seen some people in the media trying to give him some love over the course of this season. This guy's a very, very fast linebacker. Him and Levante David can cover as much ground as any other pair in the league. And that probably includes the Panthers guys as well. He's done a good job in coverage in his young career. I expect to see him improve in that area if he can. I think he becomes one of the elite middle linebackers in football. Reads the game well, and I think year 3 he should be better than ever. And if so, look out. He's a potential sleeper. I would think for a lot of people. I think he's going to have a very, very productive season, particularly with the quality of the D-line in front of him this year. The cornerback group, Brent Grimes had a superb season last year. Far better than anyone could have expected at his age. He'll return as the number 1. Just got to hope he can keep up. He really was great. Vernon Hargreaves played far too soft for my liking last year. Didn't get beat horrifically, but gave up a lot of catches because he was just a bit too conservative. Needs to play the ball a bit more aggressively this year, but does a good job against the run. Maybe not the biggest guy, but he's a willing tackler. And Javian Elliott, I suspect, will be the number 3. I've heard good things about him in Bucs camp. It seems the Bucs are pretty high on him. We'll see what he can do come the regular season. This number 3 corner spot certainly seems wide open. Behind Grimes and Hargreaves, there is very little experience in this locker room. And the safety position, which has been a perennial issue. Once again, I think all of these spots at safety are wide open. Keith Tandy, I don't think he makes it, even though he played very well at this back end of last season. But I suspect JJ Wilcox, was signed to a free agent deal, pretty big money. Not huge money, but you'd think that would get him the start. And Justin Evans, I think he'll also get the start eventually. I don't necessarily think so week 1, but again, second round draft pick kind of dictates he's going to be starting at some point. Chris Conte could always, the much maligned Chris Conte, he could end up starting. That wouldn't be a shock to me, nor would Tandy after the way he performed last season. So I think these spots are absolutely wide open. I think Wilcox probably has one nailed down. We'll see how things go. And the punter, Brian Anger, he was exceptional last year. Still probably wasn't worth a third round pick by the Jags though. Defensively, I'm concerned about this secondary, but I think the front 7 looks as good as any. I think this team's got good defensive line depth this year, which certainly hasn't been the case for a while, and the potential to get after teams on the edges, which has also been a problem. I like the linebacking group. It's just the corners and safeties. If if Grimes can repeat what he did last year, Hargreaves takes a step up, and the safes can fix themselves, I think this defence could be really, really good. They played great down the stretch last year. Once they got a little bit more used to the scheme, the team managed to retain Mike Smith. I think that helps the continuity. And it's just probably the most talented Buccaneer defence in years. So I've got pretty high expectations for these guys. It does feel like the secondary could sink things, especially in the NFC South, where all of those teams can pass. In terms of the record for next season, of course, this team just fell short last year with a 9-7 record. Started the season very slowly, adjusting to the new defensive scheme, and I think the offense, it had to figure things out. The year before they were very good running the ball. That wasn't the case at the beginning, at all last season, and I think it took them a while to realise that was going to be the case. So this year, I'm pretty high on this year's Buccaneers team, and you may not think I'm a Bucs fan. I am usually very, very, very stingy with my Buccaneers predictions. But this year, I believe in this group. I've got them going 11-5 in the regular season. I worry about the early season schedule. The Vikings, a very good defensive unit. I feel like the Bucs should have too much for them. The Dolphins are no slouches in week 1. The Patriots in week 4. Especially that Giants into the Patriots with a short week. Those could be difficult games. But I feel like if the Buccaneers can get through that, they're in a good position. The end of the season is absolutely critical. However, the last 3 weeks are all divisional games. They've got the Packers and the Falcons and the Lions before that. And I expect all of those teams to be in and around playoff contention. So the end of the season is absolutely crucial. So, yeah, start well, end well. This team makes it in and I think has a very good record. I think the defence is going to sneak up on people. The offence maybe not live up to expectations, but I do think this is the year, health not being an issue, this team finally makes it back to the playoffs. The 3 key areas, though, as I've sort of suggested, the secondary, absolutely vital. Can Brent Grimes repeat what he did last season where he was exceptional? Can Hargreaves step up? And the safeties, as I say, whoever they pick to start, they have to get that decision right. The offensive line just has to improve on its performance in every area last season. Having a new centre will certainly make the early season a bit more interesting, bit of a transition there. They have to run block better. Last year. It made it very difficult on the running backs, even if they didn't perform very well. And the run game, it just has to be there this year. This team wants to be a power running play action team, but for that to be the case, teams have to respect the run, and last year this team gave nobody any reason to worry about it. There's some talent in that group. Doug Martin's just been a bit of an enigma in his career. He's been either boom or bust. Charles Sims can certainly contribute. Jaquiz Rogers can contribute. If it can produce, I think, then this passing game can be unleashed on teams and the offense could potentially be a juggernaut. So there you have it. Those are my views on the 2017 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Throw your accusations of homerism at me down below, whether that's the comment section, whether it's the Cover Zero Facebook page, or you can find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. As I say, normally I am very much a pessimist when it comes to the Bucs. Just this year I'm letting myself get optimistic. I do think this is the year they finally turn things around and have a successful season. It's going to be tough, not the easiest schedule in the world, but I believe in the Bucs this year. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff. Check out some of the other reviews if you've enjoyed, or previews if you enjoyed it. Covered the vast majority of the league at this point. So, if you're not a Bucs fan, try and find your favourite team. They're probably covered. And, as always, thank you so much for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a great evening, and go Bucs.